Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. Really looking forward to our series today, where we'll be interviewing 4 incredible sets of founders and their investors. So we'll start with welcoming Armaan Ali, VC at Human Capital, and Tanay, CEO of Commure. So I'm going to start with you, Armaan. Tell us a little bit about Human Capital and what you're focused on.
Sounds great. Thank you for having us, and thank you to the organizers, Richard and Cecilia, Sanabel. Really appreciate being here. So I started Human Capital with my best friend from college about 9 years ago now. And what we observed was for the best companies in the world and the best founders, really they have unlimited demand for their products, unlimited demand from investors. Really, the thing that they spend most of their time thinking about is, for any problem I'm confronted with, how do I find the best person in the world to solve that problem? And how do I convince them to join me? So as a result of that, we built a firm around solving that problem. We built the largest talent and recruiting team in venture capital and growth equity globally, about 60 people full-time, tasked to solve that problem. And we've raised around a couple $2 billion around that thesis as well. And what we've observed over the last little while is that for the most ambitious founders, they've been spending more and more of their time working in more challenging and regulated industries. And you're seeing some of the most exciting companies today in areas like aerospace, in defense, and in healthcare, where I think there's an enormous amount of impact to be made. So we've been spending a lot of our time on that. I think Commure is an excellent example of a company that is solving material problems, which will result, in our view, in a tremendous amount of value being accrued to that effect. And I think when you look at what Commure is doing, they've got an incredible group of people around the table, right? Tanay is 27 years old, but has raised around $500 million plus for his business. He's got Armaan from GC as his chairman. Sequoia's around the table as well. So we're really looking for those businesses where they're tackling meaningful problems, they have the right group of people and the right level of ambition, and are thinking on a time horizon that's commensurate to that.
Amazing. And give us a little bit of insight. What was the first thing about Tanay that really stood out for you? Because I'm sure, of course, you see you meet hundreds of founders. So what was it that really caught your eye?
Yeah, so I think we look for people that have incredible technical capacity and have shown signs of commercial aptitude very early in life. But I'll let Tanay tell you a little bit about himself. But it's sort of manifested in a pretty exciting journey thus far. He's raised north of $500 million, and just recently, at the end of last year, received a $6 billion valuation for his last round of financing. But I think there were lots of things in advance of that gave it away that he'd do something pretty incredible.
Amazing. Tanay, we want to hear. Tell us about Commure, tell us about yourself, and also tell us from your perspective why you felt like this partnership was so critical to your success.
Well, I think, first of all, Human Capital, like Armaan said, at some point in time, capital itself becomes commodity. And I think when a company is growing, the fundamentals are strong. For Commure, the scale of the business is millions of patients and hundreds of thousands of providers. Our rate-limiting bottleneck, like really the constraint I wake up thinking about every morning, is talent and people. And what Human Capital has done for us is they've planted recruiters in the org. And so the best talent, Silicon Valley engineers, biz ops people, operators on the ground, whether it's in the finance teams, they're there. And that was a promise, and I think every VC firm claims you're going to help with recruiting. These guys actually delivered. And that's why that partnership has been so fruitful for many years now. I think Commure itself, and the reason this has been such a fun problem to work on, is when you look at healthcare, it's $4 trillion, right, in the US economy alone. It's also 15 to 20% of the US's labor force. So it is a massive force and massive piece of the economy. And the reason it's broken is we always talk about work versus work tax. Work is like real stuff, seeing a patient, taking care of the patient, treating them, performing surgery, treatment, whatever that might be. Work tax is all the stuff that comes around it. And in healthcare, I would say for every unit of work, you have 10 units of work tax. That's filling out paperwork, that's sending an insurance claim, clicking around on a screen in a really complex, messy EHR. And for us at Commure, using language models to actually automate that and obviate the need for a person to sit around on the phone or for a person to sit around in front of a computer filling out a claim manually or solving a denial against an insurance company is one of the most potent uses of software. Like if you could make healthcare 20-30% more efficient using language models, which when you walk into a health system or practice is actually obvious, like it's very clear you can do this, that returns $1 trillion to $2 trillion a year in non-inflationary stimulus every year to the economy. And that's what makes this so exciting. It is literally the best lever point for machine learning.
And tell us a little bit, if you can, about your journey as an entrepreneur. Was this a company, a sector that you always had in mind that you wanted to pursue?
I think I was really fortunate to have grown up in the Bay. And so I was a research intern at the Stanford AI Lab back in 2013, 2012, and sort of grew up around some of the names that ended up making AI what it is today with language models. I mean, you had Andrew Ng running the lab at the time. You had Karpathy that was working in the lab. You had Richard Socher, who went on and started MetaMind, one of the early fathers of dynamic memory networks, which helped build language models eventually. And as a research intern, you got to experience that, hey, this thing is going to work. It'll probably take some time. Like the first language model that I worked on regurgitated the letter Z like 100 times, and so it was useless, right? And then over time, these things got better and better. And I think it was clear that healthcare, given the massive chunk of labor that it is, would always be that holy application of the tool. And I think over the 6-7 years that I've worked now on Commure and the company, it's become even clearer that leveraging my skill set in artificial intelligence is best put within the healthcare sector.
And for our audience who may be less familiar with healthcare and especially the just rapid advancement that we're seeing right now with AI kind of leveling everything, what should our audience know? What should they be expecting to be a practical implication of what's coming?
Well, I think when you think about the white-collar economy and the segment of the population that sort of sits behind a computer and moves numbers around or like moves pieces of text around, I think healthcare is going to be the most impacted. And what I think the audience and the broader community should understand is healthcare is about treating patients, but it also comes with all this other busy work. And if you're looking for a segment of the economy that is in the trillions of dollars, that has a lot of that digital paperwork, and is just sitting there ready to be lit on fire with these workflow automations, it's one of the best places to deploy capital because you get put to work so quickly. One automation has like a 1-to-1 ratio with a person's job in some cases. And so the investment, if you run a health system as a CEO, it's like we partner with HCA, which is a $80 billion hospital operator in the country. The way they think about this is, they have 20, 30,000 people that sit and work insurance claims. If those people can become lines of code, one margin profile of the business completely changes. You go from a single-digit operating margin to maybe 10, 15, 20% operating margin, which allows you to reinvest in breakthroughs and better forms of treatment, which is what's so exciting about this.
I love this. So a very optimistic view in terms of what hopefully we'll see in cost reduction, but also just new technology and development coming from the space. I would love to close with you and hear from your perspective as a VC. I mean, the last couple of years have been intense in terms of the markets and the cycles that we've seen. How are you feeling about the market generally? Do you feel like these incredible advancements in AI and healthcare and the sectors that you're investing in are going to help us see a resurgence of IPOs and valuations? And how are you feeling?
I feel incredibly optimistic. I think part of the pain that we felt the last couple of years was candidly self-inflicted. I think there was a lot of exuberance. People were, very optimistic, sort of looking at the best case scenario as base case for a lot of companies. I think given what we're seeing with artificial intelligence, with sort of the proliferation of internet around the world with things like Starlink, I think that there's a huge amount of tailwinds behind companies that are going to continue to build and build products and services that are actually delivering real value. So I think if you look at the sort of durability of the businesses that are succeeding today, where capital is more competitive to go and acquire, I think you're seeing businesses that are built with more discipline that I think will be better publicly traded businesses where you're going to want to own them for a long time. So the pain was definitely there, but I feel like a lot of the waste has been flushed out of the system, and there's a lot to be optimistic about.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today, and looking forward to see what you take us through in healthcare and all the exciting developments. So best of luck to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Please. And up next, we have joining us Aneel Ranadive, VC at Soma Capital, and Shara Ticku, CEO of C16. Welcome to the stage. Good morning. Looking forward to really hearing from both of you, and a very exciting company that you're building, Shara. But we'll start with you, Aneel. Tell us a little bit about Soma Capital, what you're investing in, and what you're seeing in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So great to be here. So I'll start out with our kind of thesis to be a bit contrarian and wake people up this morning. So we believe VC is insanely broken and has gone from a high-margin cottage industry 50 years ago to a super saturated space with tens of billions AUM arms race, kind of all competing growth going downwards progressively, DCs, Bs, and As going downwards. And so our vision with Soma is that the greatest companies in human history are actually ruthlessly efficient, dilution sensitive, and often don't raise a lot. Bernard Arnault, Rockefeller, Sam Walton, Henry Ford, and then even in tech, you have Bill Hewlett, David Packard, Bill Gates, Michael Dell, Larry Ellison, Mark Benioff, raised zero VC. Amazon less than 10 million, Google only 25 million, Apple, Facebook didn't raise a lot. And so we think generational companies often emerge out of downturns. There's never been a more exciting time than now. Where 50 years ago, in the kind of mainframe infrastructure, semiconductor days, you had to kind of be at the right place at the right time. You had to, let's say, be Bill Gates and have a computer, huge mainframe in your school and get lucky and sneak in and be, stealing coding time. Whereas now, anyone, anywhere in the world can have lower costs of compute than ever, can use Copilot, can use AI, and scale to, never before imaginable potential. So Soma, we started 9 years ago, and Soma is really a financial startup, and our premise was that venture's saturated and that there's a few monopolies 50 years ago that kind of dominate the space, and as soon as there's really obvious product market fit, they often get a lion's share of the upside. And so our unique approach was, I was really lucky to have a lifetime of data. I got to watch my dad, as an immigrant from Mumbai, build Ticku software, digitize Wall Street in the 90s, middleware software competing fiercely against IBM and Oracle, was valued over $30 billion in the 90s, powering 80% of Fortune 500 companies. My dad was kind of a go-to phone call mentor involved in the early days, seeding, mentoring Google, Yahoo, Salesforce, eBay. Steve Jobs was one of his closest friends. He helped Steve pivot from next mainframe to next operating system. Worked with Mark Benioff in the early days of Salesforce. Larry and Sergey famously raised their seed round at his holiday party, which is how people like Ron Conway got in early. So I saw trillions in value creation my whole life. I got tough love from immigrant Indian father who said, you get nothing, screw you got to make it on your own, and have constraint the same way I did. So I wanted to be a founder my whole life. I spent 11 years getting massively humbled, failing at everything, credit card debt, bankrupt, sold my car, put everything I had into it. But I think for Soma, that's one of our edges, is humble ourselves, work our butts off, use an unfair network. And along those 11 years of startups, the last thing I'll say is that it turns out in the mid-2000s, being in your early 20s, was a great time in San Francisco building startups. There weren't that many founders. There was no such thing as unicorns. And some of my kind of friends that emerged during that period, and especially in the 2008 recession as we were building things, ended up being co-founders of Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, Dropbox, Box, Reddit, embedded myself in the YC ecosystem. And I'd say, I was able to build lifelong friendships there from being humble, being able to share experience, empathize. And then there was no one was talking about fundraising or valuations or unicorns. The goal is just be independent, be self-sufficient, never have to talk to a VC.
So it was certainly a bit of a different time, that's for sure. Speaking of unicorns, you've invested now in 20 unicorns across your portfolio. We have some shared on this list, I see as well. Deal, Ramp, Rippling, Razorpay, Alta Pharmacy, just to name a few. C16 is a little bit different than this. So Shara, tell us a little bit about C16, and then we'd love to hear what made this one of your investments. So please.
Definitely. So C16 is a New York-based biotechnology company, and we are reimagining how we make materials around us. Specifically, we are reimagining how we make oils and fats. That is a $250 billion industry. Oils and fats are found in everything around us, from the products on supermarket shelves, the products that clean our kitchens and our laundry, to the fuels that power cars and SAF, even airplanes. The way that we make oils and fats today is scalable, but sort of riddled with challenges. So today, oils and fats come from large-scale vegetable oil production, animal farming, and/or petroleum. And as we look to the future, as this industry is looking to grow to be $850 billion by 2050, we actually don't have sufficient ways to scale those technologies. So C16 has developed what we call biomanufacturing technology, which is using biology as the manufacturing vehicle. We've spent the last 5 years developing that technology, and last year we launched the palmless platform for sustainable ingredients to commercialize our first product, which is an alternative to palm oil.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit about your background. Was this a lifelong dream for you in thinking about building really incredible products like Palmless, or how did this come to be?
Yeah, no, I actually never thought I would be a founder. We sort of call ourselves accidental entrepreneurs. We founded this company, I would say there's sort of an intersection of two things. One, we saw the palm oil problem sort of out in the world, and two, we saw a technology which we thought could actually solve it at scale. So in my past life, I was on Wall Street. I worked at Goldman Sachs on the trading floor, and I covered our APAC markets. And in 2013, I was in Southeast Asia. I was in Singapore. And if anybody here spent time in Southeast Asia in 2013, you might remember these big episodes of haze. And so in the summer of 2013, I landed in Singapore. I had to wear an N95 mask everywhere I went. Schools were shut down because the air quality index was way over 400, which is highly, highly toxic. And this was all because of forest fires in Sumatra, where palm oil growers were slashing and burning tropical rainforest, clearing the land, and converting it to palm oil. I very quickly learned that this happens every year, and this is sort of how we've been investing in the growth of things like vegetable oils. We have to take highly valuable land near the equator, convert it from its natural habitat, the biodiverse habitat, and convert it to the sort of industrial agriculture to make a vegetable oil. That seemed completely crazy to me. My co-founder, who I met when I was in grad school, we were both at Harvard getting different degrees. He had the same experience in Costa Rica, essentially. Went to see the rainforest, and it was just gone. And so we quickly learned palm oil's in 50% of products on supermarket shelves. It is totally ubiquitous, and it's actually responsible for nearly 2% of annual greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the entire global aviation sector. So everybody's footprint from flying around in airplanes, palm oil is way worse than the aggregate annual emissions from that industry. We saw that problem. We got curious. We said, surely we don't have to sort of burn down rainforests to make vegetable oil. And we asked what might be possible if we were to use not animals, not plants, but microorganisms. Long story short, we identified a yeast which can do this naturally, and we've developed as I said, biomanufacturing technology to take a yeast and ferment it. So instead of making alcohol or ethanol, we make oils. And we sell those to large consumer goods manufacturers today. We've started in beauty and personal care, which is a great market that's very focused on innovation and very high margin. But as we look forward, this is a problem for large food manufacturers who don't have surety of supply of ingredient sourcing. An R&D manager from one of the largest consumer goods manufacturers said there's not enough palm oil in the world to meet our global needs, but also for countries as they're looking for the future of food. And we just received about a $4 million grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because of this problem, actually thinking about how do we produce food without land and what might that future look like.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on having such incredible investors, and we're all looking forward to seeing your successful journey. Thank you both so much for joining us today, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to welcome to the stage Jack Selby, the Managing Director at Thiel Capital, as well as Dr. Thomas Cahill, co-founder and Managing Director at Newpath Partners. Hi, welcome to you both. Nice to see you. Thank you. Please, you're good. All right. So wonderful to see you both, and we're going to start out by asking us to share a little bit about, Jack, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your firm and your thesis and how you two came to know each other.
Sure, happy to. So I met Peter Thiel back in 1998, and we connected, and he had an idea that effectively was the predecessor to the predecessor of what would evolve into PayPal. And he convinced me to quit my job and move out to Palo Alto and give it a go.
He's good at convincing people to quit their jobs, huh?
Yeah. So I've been working with him now for 25 years and help run, fast forward today, something called Thiel Capital, which effectively is the family office for Peter. And so we do a lot of different things. We run a macro hedge fund, we have a bunch of different venture capital funds, and we also make investments in outside funds. And our biggest allocation to an outside fund is Tom Cahill from Newpath Partners.
Amazing. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My background, I run Newpath Partners. It's a venture capital fund. And honestly, I never thought I'd be doing this stuff. So I was an MD, PhD at Duke. And I started investing and building companies during my medical school training and PhD. A couple investors, Peter and others, came to me my last year at Duke in 2018 and said, why don't you go do a fund? And I ended up just launching a fund with a couple $100 million out of medical school. And what we do is we build companies. About 75% of all drugs since 1985 have come from venture-backed companies, which is a crazy number if you think about it. There's only about 12 to 20 funds that actually build those companies. So it's like the tech world on steroids. So we just look for human biology that's interesting. And once you understand how diseases work, you can actually solve the disease. And so we built 20 companies so far. We kind of operate the company, hire the first 30 people, syndicate the deal, and then pass it off.
Wow, very, very interesting. Jumping a little bit with both of you in venture, obviously it's been a pretty rough couple of years in venture in terms of seeing the market reset and venture as an asset class really maturing. From your vantage point, should we be feeling more optimistic about this upcoming year, this upcoming couple of years? How are you seeing things in the markets that you're investing in?
Well, yeah, I mean, in biotech, it's bad out there, but it's a good thing. There was a lot of crap that came out. There's too much money infused in the system, and a lot of companies have no underlying science that's interesting. Those companies will probably die by Q3 of this year if you look at the runway, but we've got like 200 companies trading at negative enterprise value.
Wow.
But good companies, I mean, in any sector, just like in biotech, they're good companies are good companies. We've been able to take 2 companies public in this market, raise like the 7th and 8th most capital in biotech IPOs ever. So I think you can still do it. But the biology has to make sense. It can't be just, a BS company to fundraise to continue to clip fees over and over again.
And you mentioned perhaps there was too much capital in the market over the last couple of years. Now, when we're thinking about what's coming from AI and Gen AI, are you seeing that as a way to make some of these companies just more efficient in terms of outcomes, or how are you really seeing the impact of Gen AI?
In biology? I'm sure everyone here has heard a lot about AI. It's very overstated in biotech. It's always there in the background. It'll help accelerate discoveries and help automate them. But the impact it will have is most likely in areas that would surprise you. I think the most interesting thing is fraud in science. That's actually the place that's having the biggest impact. If you know Dana-Farber in Boston, all you have to do is upload these papers, And AI kind of detects all the fraud that's occurring in science. And since about 50% of all papers are fraudulent in the literature, it's going to help kind of eliminate those people.
50%.
They're not, well, maybe they're not fraudulent, they're a scam. There's kind of a difference, but they're not reproducible.
Wow.
And so as we start to go through that, it will be kind of, it'll reset the market completely. But the AI thing, it's about data. And biotech has discontinuous data sets, and it doesn't have great data. And what I mean by that is if a patient comes in and they have a disease, they go to, let's say, UT Southwestern, and then they go to, I don't know, MGH in Boston. That data is not transmissible. The medical records aren't shared, so you lose that patient. So you actually don't have continuous data, and they're lost to follow-up. So you would have to actually have like a longitudinal data set with patients that have their genetic data and their kids' genetic data and their grandkids' genetic data. So the reason AI has been useful in certain sectors is in Finland, where they started sequencing people and taking blood in the late 1970s, because Finland is like a super interesting country, because unlike other countries in Europe, it's like 75% of people in Finland would die for their country today, which is very unique in Europe. Most are like less than 10%.
Wow.
And so it's just got a super interesting nationalism. But all discoveries have come from that population. If you think about what could be done in the Middle East, we don't have any data on people outside of basically white Scandinavians, not even like Italian white people. Like basically no data on Middle Eastern folks and no data on Asian folks. And we've worked on some interesting stuff. So I worked with a lot of my investors. We worked with the administration on COVID, and then we worked on this Ozempic trial, for this weight loss trial. And one of the main reasons for that was, if we're honest about it, like COVID has a high mortality, but it tends to kill fat people, and no one really wanted to say that out loud. But something like Ozempic would have actually changed outcomes quite a bit during the pandemic. But if you think about Ozempic or Mounjaro or Wegovy or semaglutide or tirzepatide, whichever name you all know these drugs as, if you take someone from Asia or India and you look at someone that looks like me, say they're 37 years old, say they weigh 200 pounds, they will have 4 times higher rate of diabetes than I do, and we don't quite understand those genetics. So once we figure out why that happens, you can actually make better drugs, but right now that data is absent.
Very interesting. And switching over a little bit actually to more of the entrepreneurial side, you've said before that you feel like great entrepreneurs really require lateral thinking. Can you expand a little bit on that and kind of how you identify an incredible entrepreneur?
So I think the recent kind of cycle downturn in many ways is a good thing, because I think during the period of easy money after the great financial crisis for 13 years, it was almost like a game show of who wants to become a billionaire. And so young people were getting on what they thought was an escalator and hoping to get off at the top, and the confetti and the balloons would drop, and they would, there'd be like the big publisher clearinghouse check would come out, and they present it, and congratulations. But that's obviously not how it works. And so now that the cycle has turned, it's essentially culled the herd of a lot of the folks that were masquerading as entrepreneurs, and those folks have gone back to whatever other industries they were in before. So for people that are allocating capital, it's actually this kind of Darwinian process is quite useful. And because essentially what we do and what you do, Courtney, we're like talent scouts, and we're trying to figure out, is this person I'm talking to, do they have the chops to be the next amazing actor or actress or artist or however you want to describe it, and it's kind of an innate skill. And if you just have to select from a far smaller sample set, it makes the job that much easier.
We hope so.
We hope so.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been wonderful to have you, and we're looking forward to seeing the incredible companies you continue to invest in.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Amazing. So now we're going to welcome our final set of entrepreneurs and investors to the stage. So please join me in welcoming Gregory Dera and Troy Harvey, please. Welcome to you both. Excited to talk a little bit more about this wonderful partnership that we have. And I'd love to start with you, Gregory. Tell us a little bit about your firm, your thesis, what you're seeing in the market, and then we'll move to talk a little bit about your investment into Troy's company.
Right. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Gregory. I'm founder and managing part of AO. AO is the largest venture capital firm in Europe focusing on prop tech, or the built environment, which is real estate and construction industries. So The idea is that real estate is the largest industry in the world. It's a 380 trillion industry. Happens to be one of the least digitized industry globally, and it's by far the most polluting industry in the world, accounting for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. So at a time where we're all thinking about the climate crisis, I think the idea that we can impact 40% of the problem is very meaningful because we're running out of time. And so what the world needs is not another meatless burger or an alternative to plastic straws. It needs to invest capital where it's actually going to move the needle. And so that's exactly what we do. We invest in early stage, let's say late seed to Series B, companies that are transforming the industry, digitizing it, automating it, decarbonizing it, and creating climate resiliency.
Amazing. And I mean, as somebody who's spent quite a while in prop tech, it was actually a very surprising fact that you shared related to 40% of carbon emissions coming from this industry. Is that something that's typically surprising for people?
It's less and less surprising, but I can tell you that maybe 3-4 years ago when I was pitching LPs, they were like, I'm pretty sure your stat is wrong. And now it's fortunately been accepted. And I think if you double click on the number, 40%, you can divide it into two buckets. So 1/3 of that 40% is embodied carbon. So everything that goes into the process of construction, think of materials, think of the actual process of building. And by the way, I think a huge amount of global wastage is in construction and demolition, so it's also very inefficient in these processes. And then 2/3 of this 40% emission is operational carbon. So think of the lights, the HVAC, the heating, the cooling that you find in any building or structure on planet Earth is vastly, vastly inefficient. And so that's typically the type of things that we tackle.
Amazing. Troy, tell us a little bit about PassiveLogic, and then I think it'll make a fantastic sense for the audience on why AO has invested.
Sure. I mean, we started with that same 40% number, and it turns out the Department of Energy's own numbers is 40% of that is just being wasted because we're not controlling the infrastructure that we have accurately enough. And so if you take those two numbers, 40% times 40%, that's the largest chunk of energy that is just like sitting there waiting for us to save and the end climate goals of that. So that's like not turning like gas cars to electric. It's like getting rid of all transportation, right? So that's where PassiveLogic started. And what we realized is that the infrastructure in buildings and the built environment and industrial systems, the technology and the automation, it's really, really old. Like the newest platform you can buy there is like 25 years old now, and it's using 100-year-old algorithms. So you've got the world's most complex robotic systems in buildings where you look at it by just I/O count, meaning the sensors and controllables. And buildings are hitting 1 million I/O in one large building now, where a Tesla is like 200, right? So what we saw is where companies like Tesla were focused around autonomy in vehicles, there was this huge opportunity in how do we make autonomous systems in everything else to save the energy and also make those applications easy to deploy. So PassiveLogic really focused on generative autonomy, and there's two parts to what we do. How do we build those generative autonomy systems? So you're familiar with generative AI, where you can ask questions to ChatGPT, and you get answers, but what if you could just draw the systems that you're interested in and generate custom autonomous systems in a matter of minutes, just like you can use ChatGPT? And then that requires a whole new AI infrastructure. The current tools that we use, things like Google's TensorFlow or Meta's PyTorch, they have two big problems. One, they're not fast enough to do all this edge compute that we want. And the other one is they're not actually generative, these tools we're using, they're interpolative. And what we need is composable AI, the ability to take bits and pieces of different AI sub-fragments and then create new kinds of AI. So that's the thing that's missing in AI today. AI is sort of famously monolithically trained, which is very successful on one hand, but on the other hand, violates every known principle of computer science where it's been a 70-year study of composability. So we build AI frameworks and new kind of compiler technologies to then power these generative autonomy systems.
And tell us a little bit about your background. Was this a company you always had in mind to build, or how did you get here?
It wasn't a company I had in mind to build. Originally, I came out of product development, and then somewhere about 15, 20 years ago, accidentally found myself in the building environment where we were doing physics-based simulation of buildings. And at the time, there was this big industry sort of emerging of people saying, how do we make high-performance buildings? And I found myself accidentally getting sucked into this industry where it just took over my previous business. I had architects, developers from around the world asking, how can I help them build better buildings? And then once we got into that space, we realized, oh man, buildings really need a lot of help. And it's not just that they're wasting all this energy. They are incredibly opaque. There are companies in the world, some of our investors besides AO are companies like Brookfield on the building side and NVIDIA on the AI and GPU side. And they were all looking around the same problem of like, hey, this is the biggest industry in the world. And buildings are black boxes, right? We have no idea what's going on inside them.
Amazing. Tell us, as a consumer, is there any way for a consumer to be able to have more knowledge, perhaps, about the energy usage and efficiency of either residential or commercial properties? How does that exist today? Do we think we'll see more of it?
So I think in this space, the way that people think of automation on the consumer side is this very soft side of like the audio and the visual systems, right? That stuff's being sort of mainstreamified, but this sort of secret life of buildings, like the underlying systems that actually make the functional pieces go. Today, what we're trying to do is make that more interactive and something that's tangible, right? So that you shouldn't be spammed by notifications that's not smart. When we think smart building, what we think is like I press a button on my phone, something occurs, and then maybe I get all these notifications, right? So that's really nothing different than remote control. Like when I was a kid, there was these late night TV commercials for the clapper. Right, yeah. Most of what you're experiencing today is the clapper for your phone, right? So it's not actually smart. It's not, what smart would be, it's taking care of it for us, and we don't have to think about it.
Amazing. I am looking forward to a future where no more clappers and truly seeing beneficial automation. Thank you so much to you both. We're really looking forward to seeing what you're going to do together and hopefully bringing that number down much lower. So thank you both very much. Yes?
Thank you.
Great. All right.